Thank you, thank you. Right, before we go to afternoon tea, we've got one more speaker. Sandhu is the National Business Director at the China Social Solutions in Melbourne, where he heads the Digital Performance Media Program. His areas of research interest include the AU-China relations, digital transformations, and global digitisation of media and its influence. Born in Hong Kong to Indian parents, Dee is a British citizen who has lived in a number of countries and continents. Please welcome Dee to the stage. Hi.
Cool. Thank you, Mary, for that introduction. My name is Sandhu, and I work with China Social Solutions, which is a digital media agency based in Melbourne. Our work focuses on connecting Australian businesses and international brands with Chinese consumers in Australia. So just show of hands, I'm going to gauge you guys quite a bit over the course of the next 15 minutes because there's quite a bit to cover. But who would agree that we do have a large population of Chinese in Australia? Cool. So I'm done. So basically, a lot of the work that we do is we work with Chinese companies, but also we work with Australian companies, where we obviously know that there is an abundance of Chinese investment in Australia. And our work is to parlay the interests of Australian businesses to make sure that even with those investments, we're also making some money locally. So this presentation is going to be broken up in 3 parts. The first part is going to be looking at the micro factors and looking at the Chinese size in Australia. The second is going to be looking at social media. And the third section is going to be looking at this more from a macro level and what China's power and influence is going to do to Australia on a global scale. So it's not all gloom and doom. There's actually quite a lot of fun stuff that we're going to be covering. The first component is looking at Chinese Australians. So in Australia, we're home to 1.2 million Chinese Australians, and a Chinese Australian is an individual with a permanent residency or citizenship. Out of this 1.2 million, 71% of them are based in Sydney and Melbourne. A recent study showed that, well, according to the ABS, the Australian Bureau of Statistics, Sydney CBD is home to 44% of Chinese, which means that 2 in every 5 people walking around the city is Chinese. And in Melbourne CBD, it's at 41%. Going into the next section, when we look at Chinese students make up 600,000 international students, which is 1/3 of the international student body. And every minute of every day, there are 2 Chinese inbound tourists coming into the country, which means since 8 o'clock this morning until the session ends, there's going to be 1,080 new Chinese inbound tourists coming into the country. Fuck, yes. During Chinese New Year, which is in February, this ratio goes up to 5.1, which means every minute there are 5 tourists coming in. That's in February. Any questions so far? Oh, cool. When we look at the economic component and why China is so important to Australia, we have to recognize that China is Australia's largest trade partner, contributing $207 billion into the Australian economy last year. That's a lot of money. Coming in second place was the US at $165 billion. Then you've got the UK, you've got Japan, you've got India, you've got Korea, and the French and Belgium. When we look at Chinese students, last year, the higher education sector, international students as a whole contributed $33 billion into Australia, of which the Chinese contributed $10 billion. That's 1/3, which is why we can understand universities at the end of the day are a business, which is why they find Chinese students to be quite lucrative for the country. Looking at tourism, as I mentioned, those statistics in the past, in 2017, the Chinese contributed $10 billion into the Australian economy in terms of tourism. And as of 2018, this went up to $14 billion. That's a 40% increase. And it's not going to slow down anytime soon. And the easiest way to communicate with Chinese Australians, with tourists and international students, is through social media and PR. So when we look at how, work with me. When we look at how Chinese Australians consume media versus how our Australian counterparts consume media, we can see that Australians do watch more television, whereas the Chinese watch less of that, and they spend a significantly more amount of time on their mobile devices, which is pretty on par with Google and Facebook's approach of a mobile-first market. So, just a show of hands. Work with me. Cool. How many of you guys have heard of these two platforms? Okay. How many of you guys, keep them up, keep them up. How many of you guys actually know what these platforms do? Exactly. Cool. So a lot of people tend to bundle Weibo and WeChat together because they both start with We. But they are very, very different things. So WeChat is very similar to WhatsApp on steroids. It's a peer-to-peer messaging system, so I can text you, you can text me back. But there's also a service section in the back where you can order movie tickets, call a plumber, call your Uber, pre-order your meal before you get to a restaurant, and pay for it via WeChat Pay and Alipay, two of the fastest growing online payment systems, which is now being onboarded into Australia. Side note, NAB and Commonwealth Bank have both actually partnered with Alipay and WeChat Pay for the business sector, so that when tourists come into Australia, they can just pay through those mechanisms, and obviously it's more profitable for Australian businesses. Now, a big portion of what we've spoken about today is around gender diversification, sexual orientation diversification, ability diversification. One of the things I want to talk to you guys about is media diversification, which I think is something that we don't talk enough about. When we look at Weibo, in Australia, 80% of Weibo users are between 17 to 33. That's super young, but let's be honest, they're ideal for online marketing, they're highly opinionated, they're highly connected, and they can act as the influencers of their peers and of their family. And when they've got family and relatives and friends coming down from overseas, they can influence those purchase cycles. Now, when we look at this demo, we go, okay, shit, we're targeting millennials again. What's different from everything that we spoke about today? How many of you guys have been, well, I live in Melbourne, so on our Collins Street, we've got the Gucci's, the Pradas, and all that on the Paris end of town. In Sydney, I'm sure you guys have something similar, yeah? Cool. When you see people lining up to go in those stores or entering those stores, who do you normally see? Cool. Is it not strange that these individuals who are waiting to get in line are between 20 to 24 years old? They're super young. So there's a key difference between high disposable income and high spending power, and normally, as advertisers, we're at fault for using both of these words interchangeably. High disposable income means you made that shit yourself, right? That's money from your hard-earned day that you're going to spend on things that you want to spend on. High spending power means that you have the funds in your bank account, but you don't necessarily make those funds. They can come from mom and dad, but you still have a lot of spending power. And the reason why we're seeing 2/3 of all luxury sales in Australia, again, your Gucci's, your Pradas, going towards the Chinese market is because they have high spending power, right? It's the largest middle-class economy in the world today. And of course, Australia is a great place to live. Australia is a great place to travel to, which is why it's highly attractive to this market. When we look at WeChat, on the other hand, it's targeted more towards the older demo. So 65% of WeChat users are between 25 to 54 years old. This is because when we think about it logically, how many of your mums and dads or your gramps or anything like that use a peer-to-peer messaging system? So they text, basically. Most of you, right? How many of them actually have Facebook? Oh, shit, okay. My parents are not as hip as yours. But yeah, basically, there's an older demo on WeChat which makes it ideal for online reach. And because you use a peer-to-peer messaging system a lot more frequently during your day, we would recommend using WeChat as a great entry point to get into the market. Now, why do Australian businesses not speak to the Chinese market more often? At the moment, what we're seeing is a lot of the big brands are actually breaking the glass and creating the mold to start speaking with this market. It's because there's cultural differences, there's a language barrier, we don't understand their consumer consumption habits. But in all honesty, the easiest way to insert yourself into their consideration set is just to start by having a conversation with them. Put yourself on the platform and put yourself in a native environment to them. So I've got some case studies here to show you guys. This is a case study for David Jones, and this was actually a first to market in Australia. This was the first commercial fashion show that was live streamed on Chinese social media. Basically, David Jones said, this is at the start of last year. They said, we've got a fashion show and we want to start targeting the Chinese market. We've got a specific brands and vendors that we want to push. So what we did was we engaged with a Melbourne-based KOL. A KOL is a key opinion leader, otherwise known as an influencer. And we basically worked with Coco to draft up the script. She knew exactly where she needed to go on the day. She knew which brands she had to mention, which models to go to, which makeup artists to talk to. And off the back of that, also cover a 90-minute live stream. This live stream achieved 1.2 million views. That's huge on that day, and that's when David Jones actually realized the power of actually just tapping into Weibo as a platform. This was, of course, repurposed and used on other social media platforms to expand that reach organically. The next example I have for you is how we integrate online and offline. So I've got 3 examples here from you. It's Medibank, David Jones, and Hype. These are also some market firsts, and it shows you how WeChat differs from using a social media platform like Facebook. So 70% of all sales that Medibank achieves is through their call center, right? Because it's a high involvement purchase. You want to call the call center, you want to be like, hey, modify my policy to do blah, blah, blah. The problem was Medibank said, well, if a Chinese person sees the ad and calls the call center, and the person on the other side of the phone that works at Medibank is Australian, and they can't speak Mandarin, it's a shit situation for everybody. So how do we mediate that? So our team, led by Max, who's up there, we identified every Chinese sales rep in Australia that works in Medibank, and we created this journey. So that banner there is Eddie. You guys are familiar with QR codes, right? We don't normally use QR codes here, but they basically act as a hyperlink. So you scan that hyperlink, and then you can follow Medibank's account. Once you follow that, Medibank being a high involvement purchase, they've got T's and C's that you must go through. So that's the pop-up there. Then they prompt you with a 30-day offer. And as you scroll down, once you get past her face, keep going. I'm doing this like I'm scrolling it myself. You can select your state. So that's Victoria there. All right? And then when you're prompted into Victoria, you can talk to Anna, who's in Box Hill. You can talk to Nicole. And basically, we're connecting the user directly straight onto the sales rep, and they can process that conversion right away. Now, I cannot tell you what the cost per join or the cost per acquisition was for this, but what I can tell you is that it came in at 1/9 of the price of paid search, which is, of course, at the bottom of the funnel. Now, it's not to say that WeChat is a super cost-effective platform that's going to deliver magical cost per acquisitions, but what I am saying is that the platform is not as congested and it's not as competitive, which makes it a lucrative platform to use. The second example, don't start it yet, because I don't think I'm running this anymore. Wait, no, don't do it. Yeah, you've done it. So that little handshake thingy, that little thingamajiggy, is a universal sign in China. Everybody knows what that is. That's called WeChat Shake, right? It's basically, you can find it on stores in China. This is how people shop now because they don't want to be pestered by that in-store sales rep. As you walk into a store, you can shake your phone, ka-ching, and then you're prompted with a little pop-up. There's beacons in the store, right? This is the first for David Jones. So the little pop-up there, you click it, and as you're walking in store, it shows you all of the different offers that are available, right? All the different products that are on sale, and you can basically go up to the sales rep, they can scan the barcode and process the conversion right away. We can record that transaction on GA, DCM, any other tracking platform. But basically, it puts the power back into the consumer's hand. We can also record the amount of foot traffic from the moment somebody shook their phone going in store. On the first day that this was done last year in October, I think we recorded about 1,200 users going into the store. So that's just to show you like how the power of WeChat as well. The last example, which is actually starting to pop up more reoccurringly around Australia, is the QR code. So this is Hype DC. Oh shit, sorry. Did I just laser you? Sorry. The last example is Hype DC, where there's a QR code in store. You scan the QR code using your phone, and as you walk into the store, you're prompted with all the different sales offers. They're in English and in Mandarin, so that, of course, the person in stores knows what's going on. And again, everything is recordable.
That's your ding.
That's my ding. Cool. I was just about to talk about how China was going to take over the world,
20
but
seconds.
you got to wait for... No, it's too late for that. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news. I always get those jobs.